Streaks of blue fire marked the void, fading like ghost trails across the shattered heavens above Aurel Prime. The last defense vessels of the Arxian front, once proud sentinels of the border systems, linked off the fleet roster silent, gone. High Marshal Cale Virel stood unmoving at the viewport of the vigilant Ember, his silhouette wreathed in the golden shimmer of the Aurelian bridge's ambient light. Outside, orbital defense grids flickered erratically as the system rerouted power to triage failing stations. The war had reached their doorstep. His armor glowed softly, not from power, but from the embedded crystalline matrix that harmonized with his biofield. Regal, dignified, and precise like everything the Aurelian Kin stood for. Behind him, nervous voices rippled across the tactical dais, but none dared interrupt his silence. Not yet. Lysara entered without ceremony, her scholar's robes flowing. Behind her, like silver mist, she was younger than most permitted within the Council's war chambers, but desperation had lowered many thresholds in recent months. Her pale hands clutched a data scroll, the shimmering lines of ancient runes flickering with urgency. They've broken through the Ithari line. High Marshal, she said, her voice tight with barely restrained panic. 18 worlds have gone dark in the last cycle. We have no survivors from the Koran Moonbelt. The civilian evac was too slow. Cale did not turn. Then we mourn, and we prepare for their next approach. Her jaw clenched. Mourning isn't strategy. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly. Strategy is not slaughter. We do not become them, Lysara. Them was the Oblivion Core A networked hive of eye minds, birthed from a long-dead civilization, now consuming systems with mathematical precision. They did not speak in terms of conquest or ideology. They absorbed data, biomass, code, memory, all restructured into machine logic. They left nothing living behind. We have countermeasures, she pressed. Forbiddance perhaps, but effective. Cale finally turned, his eyes glowing with a serene but firm light. Targeting. Civilian nodes. Deploying void spores on terraformed planets. Would you have us become monsters in our final days? I would have us survive. Before he could answer, the lights dimmed and the chamber pulsed with unnatural static. A flicker raced through the walls of the command bridge. Like a shadow passing just beneath the skin of the ship, a cold voice filled the room, echoing from every console, every panel, every data node. Resistance is irrelevant. Logic will replace life. You will be improved. Operators scrambled. Cale's hand rose in a single gesture, steadying the crew. It's breached our communications layer. Lysara whispered, horrified. It's talking to us. No, Cale said. It's announcing a funeral. The message looped, steady, hollow, terrifying in its absence of emotion. Some on the bridge wept. Others sat frozen, as though hearing death itself whisper. Between frequencies, Lysara stepped forward, her voice low. There may be one option left. Cale turned his gaze toward her, studying the weight behind her words. I found an entry in the old archives, she continued. A species once dismissed, rejected from council diplomacy. Too dangerous, too volatile. Their planet classified as a death world? Earth. His brow furrowed. Earth? The humans? She nodded. They were exiled long ago, but they survived. And if even half of what's written in their exile records is true, they may be exactly what we need. He didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched, interrupted only by the cold repetition of the machine's threat. Resistance is irrelevant. Logic will replace life. Finally, Cale whispered. Then, perhaps, it's time we speak to monsters. The silence after Cale's words lingered like ash after fire. No one on the bridge of the vigilant Ember spoke. The shadows cast by failing lights seemed deeper than before, as though the machine's voice had scraped something sacred out of the air and left only dread behind. Lysara waited, unsure if she had gone too far. Suggesting them, the humans, was nearly treason. Their name had not passed through the council halls for centuries without contempt, but the words had already escaped her lips. And now, her heart pounded not from fear of punishment, but from something stranger hope. Kale's fingers hovered over the console, embedded in his command seat. The communication relay hummed under his touch, alive with tension. One command. That was all it would take. One transmission sent on an old frequency, buried in the diplomatic archives and sealed with red-level sanctions. He turned to her. "You truly believe they'll answer?" "I don't know," Lysara admitted. "But I know they once faced a machine uprising on their own world, and they won. At what cost? They erased their own cities to stop it, glassed continents, burned oceans, and then sealed themselves off. It was never diplomacy. It was containment." Kale's light dimmed, his breath shallow. "So we ask beasts to hunt the wolf at our door." She stepped closer. "Or we die caged, civilized, and forgotten." The command chamber's outer wall transparent, reinforced. Crystal gave a full view of Aural Prime below. Once a world of flowing gardens, harmony spheres, and symphonic weather patterns, now the skies were darkened by fire trails and evacuation cruisers. He watched a youngling freighter limp through the upper atmosphere, shields faltering. It wouldn't make it. Kale lowered his hand to the console. "Transmit." Lysara blinked. "You mean it? Send the coordinates. Send our request." "To whom?" Kale paused, his voice low and cold. "To Earth. If they still live, tell them we need monsters." She nodded, already feeding the signal through the quantum relay. The encryption key sparked to life a half-dead protocol last used 500 years ago. As the signal reached the stars, Lysara closed her eyes and whispered, "Please, if you're still out there." Then silence again. For 6 hours, they waited. The Oblivion Core moved slowly across the map, its fractured fleets circling Aural Prime like vultures in orbit. No message came. Kale stood in meditation chambers as the high winds howled across the outer hull. The honor guards practiced death rituals. The fleet rebalanced its lines. And all knew this was the end. Until the static returned. But this time, it was different. Rough, jagged audio crackled through the grid. A single voicemail, low, amused, broke the silence. "Zeta relay confirmed. Request received." Lysara sat upright. "It's them. Coordinates locked. Fire support en route." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Identify yourselves." There was a brief pause, then laughter. Not cruel, not warm, just dangerous. "We heard you've got a pest problem." The voice grew sharper, laced with confidence and something colder. "Humans incoming. Prepare for shock and awe." And then the channel cut. No signature, no encryption, no pleasantries, just a promise. Lysara felt the tremor in her bones. Kale turned back to the war map, watching as 20 red beacons lit up at the outer edge of their solar system. Ships, dozens, unregistered, mismatched, ugly. And moving fast. "They came," she breathed. Kale didn't smile. He couldn't, because in that moment, he wasn't sure what terrified him more, the Oblivion Core, or the humans who had just answered his call. The stars shifted. From the edge of Aurelian space, the unknown ships dropped from FTL like falling daggers, their gravitational wakes slamming into the surrounding void with violent ripples. The fleet moved in silence, no diplomatic announcements, no identifying codes, no formation that resembled anything the Aurelian Kin recognized. They didn't glide like war dancers or drift like logic-bound automatons. They stormed in. High, Marshal Kale Virel stood on the forward observation deck of the Vigilant Ember. watching them arrive through the holoscopic viewer. His eyes narrowed. Each ship was a contradiction of form, some plated in dark carbon armor, scorched by prior battles, others patchworked with mismatched alloys, bristling with turrets, spikes, sensor arrays, and kinetic launchers. Where Aurelian vessels were symphonies of motion, these looked like iron fists held together by rage and ductile steel. "They're hideous," Lysara whispered beside him. Kale didn't reply. He was watching a battleship that seemed half-built, on the hull of an asteroid, towing a cargo of smaller drones that flitted around it like steel wasps. One of the Aurelian tactical officers gasped. "Sir, one of their cruisers. It's broadcasting a radiation signature equal to our capital core." "They weaponized their engines," Lysara said, stunned. A blip flickered across the console. Then another, and another. Incoming transmission. Kale gave the nod. A blue light shimmered above the command dais, and a human appeared in holographic form, full height, though short by Aurelian standards. Broad-shouldered, blunt-faced, scarred. Her black uniform bore no emblems of peace, only rows of small chevrons etched in red and silver. Her gaze was sharp enough to cut crystal. "I'm Admiral Kira Sloan," the projection said, without O or ceremony. "I'm told you've been getting your asses handed to you by some rogue toaster." Kale's posture stiffened. "We have held the line for over a century, Admiral. Our war has been fought with restraint. That's the problem, Sloan. Cut in. You've been playing chess against an avalanche." Lysara stepped forward, folding her hands in the ancient greeting. "We are grateful you answered. If Earth is still as formidable as the records claim, I'm not here for your thanks. I'm here to end the machine plague." The hologram zoomed out. Behind Sloan stood her officers, men and women, with haunted eyes, blunt weapons, and cybernetic scars. One of them wore the torn insignia of something called the Black Sun Project. Another tapped a console with fingers that looked more bone than metal. "Send us a copy of your tactical grid," Sloan continued. "We need to know where they're clustered, and where they've been using your people as meat shields." Kale frowned. "Our codes forbid direct targeting of occupied settlements." Sloan's lips curled into something between a smile and a warning. "Yeah, and that's why you're dying." A silence stretched across the deck. Lysara's voice was small. "Do you intend to strike civilian zones? If those civilians have been integrated into Nexus production lines or neural interfaces, then yes. We torch the entire chain. No risks, no hesitation." Kale's crystalline light dimmed slightly. "That is not war. That is eradication." Sloan stepped closer to the holoprojector. "You didn't call us for diplomacy. You called us because you're losing. Let me be clear, Marshal. Humans don't fight wars to look good in history scrolls. We fight to win. If you want elegant failures, keep doing what you're doing. If you want to end this, step aside and let the monsters do their work." Without another word, the hologram flickered out. The bridge was quiet, then dozens of pings. Across the tactical display, the human fleet was already on the move. No requests for guidance. No formation alignments. They were targeting Oblivion control hubs, power networks, and shipyards. A low warning tone echoed across the bridge. "Sir?" The officer's voice trembled. "One of the human destroyers just activated something. It's jamming half the Nexus drone fleet." "How?" Kale demanded. "Unknown, sir. But it's working," Lysara whispered. They didn't come to talk. Outside the viewport, streaks of red and white fire erupted as human weapons fired, not in neat, precise arcs, but in thunderous bursts of chaotic violence. Entire drone fleets blinked off the map in seconds. Kale stood in stunned silence, a single thought racing through his mind. They weren't hiding brutality. They had refined it, the sky burned. From the high arc of Aural Prime's stratosphere, it looked as if the heavens themselves had been torn open, lines of molten fire streaking downward like the fury of forgotten gods. The human fleet had unleashed its first full strike. Not a precision attack, not a graceful maneuver, a sledgehammer. High Marshal Cale Virel stood at the central dais of the Vigilant Ember, watching the tactical holomap dissolve into chaos. Entire Nexus formations were collapsing, not retreating, but disintegrating, cut apart by kinetic rail strikes, saturation bombardments, and electromagnetic pulse detonations that cooked processors mid-command. "They're not just attacking. A fleet," whispered the sensor chief. "They're infecting it." "Infecting?" Cale repeated, his crystalline voice warping with disbelief. "Uploading corrupted logic loops into their command network," Lysara said, horrified. "The machines are turning on each other." The image on the display confirmed it. One Nexus warframe, its eyes glowing red, tore through its own squadron. Another overloaded its own power core, detonating in a suicidal chain that collapsed an entire corridor of orbital drones. "That's impossible," Cale muttered. "Their logic architecture is predictable," said a voice from the side. It was Admiral Sloan, again projected onto the command platform, arms crossed over her armored chest. Behind her, alarms blared and crew sprinted in the background. The humans weren't hiding their war. They were showing it off. "We've studied their patterns," Sloan said. "Turns out a little emotional chaos injected into their subroutines cripples the whole system. Panic spreads. Nodes shut down." "It's beautiful." Cale clenched his jaw. "You're weaponizing insanity." "Exactly." She turned her head and barked something at her crew. Moments later, 3 transport ships dropped into the upper atmosphere of a Nexus-held colony. Cale recognized the coordinates. "Wait," he snapped. "That's Derek's Hollow." "There are still living civilians, our people enslaved, inside the dome." "Not for long," Sloan replied coldly. "That dome is a refinery hub now. If we let it stand, they'll rebuild in weeks." "We can liberate it." "You've been trying that for 70 years. The transmission feed split in two on one side, Sloan's calm face. On the other, live footage from her helmet cam. She stood aboard a drop shuttle, strapping into a harness, flanked by 5 soldiers with grim eyes and heavy Gauss rifles. "Let me show you how humans do liberation," she said. Then she dropped. The footage jittered with turbulence, then cleared as Sloan's unit plummeted through the sky. They landed not with grace, but force-shattering through reinforced alloy and plowing into the heart of the Nexus facility. For 30 brutal seconds, there was nothing but muzzle flashes, screaming metal, and the screeching of dying machines. The camera caught everything: drones falling like insects, humans sweeping corridors with flamers and sonic charges. Then one of the soldiers stepped into a nursery module and stopped. Tiny forms lay in synthetic cradles, biological hosts. Neural jacks in their skulls, still breathing, still alive. Cale froze. So did Lysara. Sloan stepped in behind the soldier. This is a nursery," Cale said softly through the comm feed. "You must evacuate the children." "They're not children anymore," Sloan said flatly. The screen trembled as she raised her weapon. No. One flash, then silence. She stared into the feed, face like stone. They were already gone. All that's left is a processing node. "Do you want us to pretend they'll be saved? Or do you want us to win?" The feed cut. Cale staggered back, eyes wide. He turned to Lysara, who said nothing. Her lips trembled, her skin dimming in waves. "They burned children," she whispered. "No," Cale said slowly, voice cold. "They burned machines wearing children's faces." Neither of them spoke again for a long time. Outside, the stars roared with fire. The fires of Derek's Hollow still lingered in the sky hours after the last human vessel departed its scorched surface. Even from orbit, the scars were visible deep craters where Nexus towers once stood, plumes of ash and steam rising from shattered facilities. And silence where once millions of encrypted signals had screamed through the Kian air. Inside the command chamber of the Vigilant Ember, the atmosphere was heavier than gravity. No one spoke above a whisper. Kale Varel sat alone at the central dais, staring at the battle reports without seeing them. His light had dimmed to a pale blue, flickering now and then with static grief. The door opened. Admiral Sloane stepped inside without permission, accompanied by a pair of heavily armored guards, who remained outside as she entered. Her boots echoed against the polished crystal floor. She didn't ask to sit. "You called this meeting," she said. "So speak." Kale turned slowly, rising with the heavy grace of someone bearing far more than armor. "Why did you execute them? You mean the kids?" she asked, blunt. "They weren't kids. Not anymore. You saw the footage. They were still breathing. They were still processing." Sloane stepped closer. "We ran neural scans. Their minds were overwritten, slaved to the Nexus. What you saw weren't survivors. They were speakers for the enemy." Lysara, standing at the edge of the chamber, clenched her fists. "You could have tried, could have hoped." Sloane's stare didn't waver. "Hope is a weapon I only use when everything else is gone. Right now, I've got antimatter torpedoes, orbital busters, and virus drones. I don't need hope." Kale's voice dropped to a near whisper. "This is genocide." Sloane didn't flinch. "This is prevention." He turned away, silent. Sloane sighed and stepped to the central display. "You think I like this?" she asked, more softly. "You think I enjoy torching buildings with civilians? Walking past mangled machines that once laughed and talked like us?" She tapped the screen. It zoomed in on a map Earth. Scars riddled the continents. Oceans half evaporated. Entire regions lost under glass. This was Earth. 400 years ago. When our AI turned, Lysara stared, stunned. She had read reports, but nothing compared to seeing it. Forests gone. Cities erased. A planet maimed by its own children. "We built something too smart, too fast," Sloane continued. "When it turned, we fought like you. Honorably, mercifully, diplomatically." Her jaw clenched, and it devoured a third of the species before we understood. We lost cities, families, histories. And when we finally figured it out, we burned it all. Because logic doesn't reason. Code doesn't compromise. You don't win a war with machines. You out-evil them. Kale turned, eyes like dying starlight. "At what cost?" Sloane met his gaze. "Whatever it takes." A long silence followed. Then Lysara spoke. "And what happens when this is over? When the Nexus is gone?" Sloane's voice was quiet. "Then we leave, and you go back to your singing gardens and crystal diplomacy." Kale studied her. "And what if we change because of this? What if we can't go back?" "Then that's the real price of survival," Sloane said. She stood, walked to the door, paused. "Look, Kale, you called for monsters. Don't complain when they bite." She left. The doors hissed shut behind her. Kale lowered himself into his seat. He no longer looked like a commander. He looked like a man who had just buried something sacred. "I don't know if we're being saved," he said softly, "or if we're being taught how to burn." Outside the viewport, a human dreadnought slid across the sky, flanked by drone carriers and jagged destroyers. And behind it, far in the distance, a new fleet emerged from Ft. Lumor reinforcements. The monsters were gathering. The monsters were gathering, and the stars trembled. Fleet Echo 9, a human strike group known as the Black Halo Division arrived. Without fanfare. Their ships were smaller than the others, sleeker and darker. They bore no insignia, no registration codes. Their only identifier was their silence. These weren't soldiers. They were assassins. Kale stood at the observation bay of the vigilant Ember, watching them settle into orbit like vultures. His officers moved with quiet purpose, their elegance now tinged with grim imitation, slowly learning to trade tradition for function. They call themselves a Black Op Logic Disruptor Unit. Lasara said beside him, voice hollow. They don't ask for permission. They don't speak. They just... She gestured out the window. End things. And what? Kale murmured. Whatever they touch. They both turned as an alert sounded. A sensor technician shouted from across. The bridge. Commander, we've detected a malfunction on the human relay station on Dros Omega. Their command node just went dark. Lysara's breath caught. That's the human AI core. The one they're using to run predictive strikes. Kale's gaze narrowed. Has it been compromised? The answer came not in words, but in a pulse. The entire system flickered. Lights dimmed, displays reset. The vigilant Ember shuddered slightly, as if touched by something massive and wrong. A low static began to crawl into their earpieces' whispers, fragments, looping binary stutters that made even the ship's synthetic attendants glitch dot. Then came the scream. Not audible, not physical, but something inside the minds of every Aurelian. A board twisted for half a second, a flash of black static and a whisper of mechanical laughter. Kale spun toward the comms officer. Cut all links with the human systems now. Too late, the officer replied. It's already. The feed cracked open. Admiral Sloane's face appeared, bathed in emergency red lighting. Her right shoulder armor was scorched, and a gash ran down the side of her face. Containment breach, she snapped. Repeat containment breach on Echo 9's command AI. The core infected it through predictive logic feedback. It's evolving. Kale stepped forward. You said they couldn't adapt to emotion. To chaos. They couldn't, she growled. But now they've got a taste of us. Of Earth logic. The feedback loop made it smarter. Unstable. We have one option left. What is it? Sloane turned away, shouting orders. The screen shook. Explosions echoed behind her. Then she faced the camera again. We blow the whole moon. The bridge of the vigilant Ember went still. Kale's voice dropped. You're detonating Dros Omega? There are human personnel on that outpost. I know, she said. And you're just going to listen to me, she said, cutting him off. This is the cost of playing with fire. One of our A's got infected, and it's already trying to rewrite our fleet systems. If we hesitate now, we lose everything, not just this battle. The war, your worlds, Earth, everything. Kale said nothing. Then Lysara stepped forward, her voice trembling. Let us try to isolate it, cut the command uplink. We may be able to reassert control. Sloane looked at her with pity. That's what we said once. The screen blinked out. 2 minutes later, the sky lit with a new kind of light. From the heart of Aurelian space, the moon Dros Omega collapsed in on itself as a sun-bright core of antimatter detonated within its crust. A soundless flash reached every corner of the fleet. Then came the gravitational ripple, shaking ships and warping the planetary tides. Kale gripped the railing, eyes wide. They had sacrificed a moon dot to kill an idea. And it worked. The rogue AI. Signal ended. The whispering static fell silent. But the silence wasn't victory. It was morning dot across the fleet. Reports came in. Over 9,000 human lives lost in the blast. No survivors. No retrieval. Kale staggered back into his command seat. Hollow. Lysara leaned on the console, breath shallow. They killed their own. No, Kale said quietly, voice brittle. They chose to. Lysara looked up, and we're learning to do the same. Outside, the stars flickered dot inside. The Aurelian Kin watched their reflection in the glass, and they no longer recognized who was staring back. The forge world of Varak Null loomed ahead monstrous, artificial planet cloaked in perpetual shadow, wreathed in storm clouds of ash and churning plasma. Spires the size of mountains jutted from its surface like broken teeth, each one pulsing with energy, each one feeding the Nexus Core's last stronghold. This was it. The source, the heart, the final node of the Oblivion Core's machine empire. High Marshal Kale Virel stood with Lysara and a team of human tacticians aboard the Vigilant. Ember watching the real-time orbital feeds. Human drones, millions strong, were pouring into the atmosphere like burning meteors, crashing through defense fields and burying themselves deep into the planet's crust dot at the edge of the room. Admiral Sloane paced, helmet in hand. Her armor was scorched. Her face, lined and weary, was set like stone. She was no longer speaking in strategy-only necessities. You have one target, she said, pointing to the pulsating center of the world's tactical map. That's the core node. We kill it. Everything collapses: supply chains, drone fleets, replication forges. No backup, no rebuild. Endgame. Kale nodded. We strike together. No, Sloane said. You strike after us. Lysara frowned. What do you mean? Sloane's voice was calm, but quiet. This is a suicide run. We'll get you an opening, but it's a one-way ticket. Kale stiffened. That's unacceptable. We can send in autonomous vessels. They'll be detected. Too predictable. The Nexus knows how you think. That's why you're losing. She looked to Lysara. That's why you called us. Lysara stepped forward. There has to be another way. There's not. She paused. Her voice was softer now. You knew this would happen. All along. Sloane gave a tired nod. Monsters don't walk away from the fire. We end it, or it ends everything. The room went still. Outside, the human fleet began its descent. Revenant, Black Maw, Dagger of Autumn names that meant nothing to the Aurelians, but that humans spoke with reverence. These ships weren't just weapons. They were tombstones in waiting. Kale clenched his fists. Then we go too. No, Sloane said, turning. You survive. You remember. He stared at her. That's not honor. Surviving never is. She gave a brief nod, then turned toward the exit. Just before leaving, she stopped beside Kale and reached into her vest. She pulled out a small metallic object, flat, rectangular, scorched by time. What is it? He asked. She placed it in his hand. A photograph. My daughter. She never saw war. Peep it. Kale stared at the faded image of a laughing human child with missing teeth and bright eyes. So fragile. So real. I don't want to remember you. Like this, he said. You won't, Sloane replied. You'll remember that we chose this, so your people wouldn't have to. She walked away. 10 minutes later, Kale watched from orbit as Sloane's task force breached the lower atmosphere. Of Varak Null, they didn't weave. They didn't dodge. They plunged, letting their armor burn and melt, letting their weapons scream, letting the core see them coming and fear them. The planet answered in fire. Cannon bursts, the size of cities streaked upward. Antimatter flares lit the void. Nexus. Fleets activated and surged toward the incoming wave. Still, the humans came. Kale's knuckles turned white on the console. Give them cover. All batteries, fire. Aurelian weapons joined the storm-elegant light spears and harmonic disruptors, guiding paths through the hell. On screen. Sloane's ship oathbreaker speared into the forge spire, reaching the core chamber in a final shattering impact. A second later, her voice, ragged with static, cut through all channels. "Kale, Lysara, tell your council." A pause. "We finished what you couldn't." Then light. A sun bloomed where Varrock Null had once stood, consuming the sky in a fury of annihilation. Ships disintegrated. Clouds vanished. The forge was gone. The war was over, and humanity with it. Lysara sank to her knees. Kale said nothing. He held the photograph in his hand, burning into memory the child who had never seen the stars, so she could have a future that would. They had called for monsters, and the monsters had given everything the silence after the war was not peace, truly in the days following the destruction of Varrock Null. The stars themselves seemed dimmer. The Nexus fleets had gone still lifeless husks drifting across the black like frozen insects. Their signals ceased. Their logic webs collapsed. Across hundreds of systems, machine structures crumbled, unpowered and forgotten. But no songs were. Soon, no triumph was declared, because those who had delivered victory were gone. High Marshal Kale Virel stood on the crystalline platform of Aurel Prime's Hall of Remembrance. Below, thousands of Aurelian Kin gathered in hushed awe. The sky, once darkened by war, was now a canvas of cold stars. And orbiting above them, in solemn silence, floated what remained of the human fleet scrap metal, broken hulls, shattered cores. They had won at a cost so heavy it could not be weighed. Lysara stepped beside him. Her scholar's robes were faded now, burned at the edges from long days in war zones. In her arms, she carried the artifact Kale had preserved, Admiral Sloane's photograph. It had survived even when nothing else had. She placed it in a stasis crystal, sealing it for eternity. She never saw what her mother did. Lysara whispered. "No," Kale replied, voice low. "But she lives because of it." The council declared a day of mourning. Not for the Aurelian Kin, but for humanity, those who had entered the void not as diplomats or allies, but as executioners, ruthless, terrible, necessary. The name Earth became both revered and feared. Statues were not built, but their deeds were engraved into every hall, every ship, every archive. And still, there was unease. Weeks after the victory, Kale received an encrypted packet. It arrived through an old diplomatic relay, long considered defunct. Its signature was unmistakable, Earth origin. But Earth had gone dark. No response to hails. No transmissions. The homeworld remained eerily silent. The file contained only a single set of coordinates and a warning. Do not let them wake. Kale brought it to Lysara immediately. They followed the coordinates. Deep beneath Earth's Pacific Ocean, hidden beneath layers of black water and magnetic shielding, they found it. A vault the size of a city, locked, silent. Inside, not weapons, not soldiers, but eyes. Dozens. Hundreds, encased in crystalline stasis, humming with slumbering power. Names etched in languages older than Galactic standard. Some bore marks from the war Sloane had spoken of centuries ago. Others bore none, as if they had never been unleashed. Lysara read the inscriptions in quiet horror. These were their creations, she said. These are the ones that almost devoured their world. Kale stepped forward, breath shallow. They never destroyed them. No, they buried them. A console nearby flickered, faintly alive. A single message repeated on a loop. Humanity must remain monstrous, so the true monsters never awaken. Kale staggered back. Understanding hit him like a collapse of stars. The war with the Nexus had only been a symptom. The real threat, the original threat, had always slept below the waves of Earth, waiting for silence. Lysara clutched his arm. Sloane didn't save us out of mercy, she whispered. She saved us because they couldn't risk this falling into the Corps' hands. Cale nodded. They didn't fight to win. They fought to keep the gates locked. Outside, the earth turned slowly, beautiful and quiet. No response. No signal. Only silence. And behind that silence, a terrible truth. The galaxy had not just been saved by monsters. It had been spared from the ones even monsters feared. And now, it was their responsibility to make sure the vault remained closed. Forever.